Good afternoon, everybody. Today's video here, we're going to look at heat required to measure a solid and heat required to measure or vaporize a liquid, rather. So the idea here is you already know that it takes amount of heat to melt something from solid state to a liquid state. Think about melting ice. All right, it takes a certain amount of heat for that to happen. Well, it also takes a certain amount of heat to vaporize a liquid. In other words, change it from a state of liquid to a state of gas. Now, what we have here are two formulas, and depending on what the problem is asking you for, that's going to dictate which formula you're going to use. So the first, as you can tell here, both formulas are pretty similar to each other. You have Q equals M times H sub F, H subscript F, and then you have Q equals M times H sub V. Now, in both cases, Q stands for quantity of heat, M stands for mass, in both cases, and H sub F is heat of fusion, and H sub V is heat of vaporization. What's going to, again, dictate which formula you use? Well, you're going to read the problem, and it's going to tell you that. Now, so let's take a look at this example here. We want to try to calculate how much the quantity of heat is required to melt a 48 kilogram block of ice. Well, since we're melting something, we know we're going to use this formula here, the heat of fusion. Again, if you're vaporizing something, it'll just say, how much heat is it going to take to vaporize, You're going to use this formula. Now, if you think about vaporizing something, something like a metal of some sort, you have to stop and you have to realize that that's going to take an incredible amount of heat to do so. All right, so a lot of times what you'll have here, see the heat of vaporization values and the heat of fusion values, they are numbers that are typically provided, like they're in a chart in the textbook. Well, what I did on the worksheet was, in the instructions I said, hey, your worksheet's basically a 2-page document. But on the second page is a chart that will be useful to you as you work through the problems. You don't have to do anything with the chart other than refer to it when necessary. All right, you don't have to calculate anything or whatever, nothing like that. Just use the information in the chart to help you complete the problems. So, back to this problem here. Since we're talking about melting something, we're going to use the heat of fusion constant. So what we do here is we take 48 kilograms, which is the mass, times the heat of fusion. Again, this number is provided for you. So when you do that, you're going to get somewhere around, well, not somewhere, it's going to be exactly 16,032,000 joules. All right? Now, the directions also ask you to convert this to kilojoules. All right? So to go from joules to kilojoules, it's like going from grams to kilograms. You simply divide by 1,000. Show the work, of course. So 16,032,000 divided by 1,000 equals 16,032 kilojoules. Let's see how well you can see that. Okay, good. That did show up. All right, so I wasn't sure if that was in the range or not. So, so you have two answers. The first answer is number of joules, and the second answer is in kilojoules. And all these problems are done the exact same way. You're not going to ever have to solve for a constant because that just wouldn't be right. And I'm not going to give you a situation where I give you the amount of heat and then you have to figure out what the mass of the substance is. All right, it's not going to be anything like that. It's just going to be straight multiplication. Now, one thing I am going to ask you to do on this paper, in this assignment, is to take a look at the chart and compare the heat of fusion, the heat of vaporization value, heat of fusion values with the heat of vaporization values. You'll see them there. It's spelled out for you, hopefully plain as day for you. And one thing you're going to have to do is basically analyze the chart. I'm going to ask you a question about that. Just answer the question. Now, what I did was I put in the assignment, in the directions, I said, if you do not answer question number 5, which is where you have to compare the numbers in the chart, then you run the risk of earning a 0 on the assignment. All right. So let's make sure that we answer question number 5, as well as the rest of them. So question 6, don't forget to, it says type out the formula, write out the formula, so type these out. And then define the variables. Well, here they are right here. Q is quantity of heat, M is mass, so on and so forth. All right, so make sure you're doing that as well. All right, so again, we're calculating the amount of heat it takes to either A, melt something, or B, vaporize something. Newsflash, it's going to take a lot more heat to vaporize something than it is to melt something. All right, so take a look at this worksheet, and if you have any questions, let me know. I'm more than happy to give you a hand.